It's an orange juice.
What's up everyone? This is Yarn of Orange Juice. The Graveyard is a legendary spell that can be cast anywhere on the map. It has a slow load time, so the first skeleton spawns 1.5 seconds after it's casted. Then, a skeleton spawns every 0.5 seconds up to 20 skeletons over a period of 10 seconds. Each time you cast Graveyard, the spawn locations will vary slightly, so the damage will always be a little different. Because of this, results in this video will vary, but the underlying concepts are relevant. It has a 5-tile radius similar to Rage. This large radius limits where it can be casted on an arena tower. If you cast the Graveyard centered right on top of the arena tower, there's an extremely high chance it'll activate the King's Tower, so this position almost never makes sense to use. That's the nature of this random spell. A slightly safer play is planting the Graveyard 1 tile to the left of the center, but it's still risky because there's still that small chance it can activate the King. With these limitations, there are 3 safe positions to cast the Graveyard where the King's Tower won't activate. You can cast it 2 tiles from the core of the arena tower. You can plant it 1 tile above to force more skeletons to spawn behind. You can cast it directly in the center for skeletons to spawn more evenly. Or you can cast it 1 tile below for more skeletons to spawn in front of the tower. The downside of this is that the skeletons will clump up near the wall and it'll be easier to counter. Graveyard sent in alone is manageable, but shines with cards that can support it. It is a spell after all. Alternatively, if you're able to get an elixir advantage over your opponent, then a solo Graveyard on the arena tower can be devastating. It's an excellent backdoor card. It can still do tons of damage if your opponent doesn't have proper counters to it. The Graveyard can counter the Princess, but it's not reliable. On the left side, the Princess takes care of most of the skeletons. On the right side, the skeletons spawned enough to kill the Princess earlier. Packing a zap ensures that she dies, allowing the Graveyard to deal massive damage to the tower. If you can distract the arena tower from targeting the skeletons, the damage ramps up very quickly. Even though the Mega Minion couldn't reach the tower, it tanked the tower and Musketeer, allowing the Graveyard skeletons to stack up to deal over 2,000 damage. Naturally, tanks pair great with the Graveyard. The opponent now has to deal with an incoming giant and the waves of skeletons. Even with the bomber in the back, the giant tanked the tower, allowing the Graveyard to deal almost 1,000 damage to the tower. Mini tanks are amazing too. Even a 2 elixir ice golem can be devastating. Since the Graveyard can be planted anywhere, the Miner complements it incredibly well. Despite the Valkyrie being a strong counter against the Graveyard, this Miner combo still dealt almost 1,000 damage. Pairing the Graveyard with high damage units that can land a few hits on the arena tower is another great combo. Your opponent has to address both the front and back end. The Hog didn't make it to the tower, but he tanked enough for the Graveyard to deal over 1,000 damage, even with a Musketeer in the back. Graveyard synergizes with damage dealing units like a Musketeer. They can deal massive damage to the tower. Even though the Musketeer couldn't reach the tower, she tanked the tower, letting the skeletons ramp up. Even with a bomber, the simple combo did almost 1,000 damage. Freeze works well with the Graveyard. It's very effective once you wait for your opponent to react with a counter. Then, freeze the tower and their counter. When an elixir collector is planted behind the arena tower, a Graveyard can damage the tower and collector. If the pump is beside the King's Tower and the Graveyard is conservatively planted in this position, it'll demolish the elixir collector, but there's still a chance it'll activate their King's Tower. If the elixir collector is planted in front of the King's Tower, casting a Graveyard in the center is pointless because both arena towers are well within range. Once the King's Tower is activated, a Graveyard will struggle to deal much damage to an arena tower. The game has a 1-second deploy time, and the Graveyard has a 1.5-second load time, so the first skeleton won't spawn for 2.5 seconds from the moment you cast it. Since it has such a slow initial spawn time, there's not enough time to react with the Graveyard. The Inferno will still lock onto the tank. With the spell having 2.5-second delay, you're going to have to predict the Inferno Tower and pre-cast the Graveyard to distract the Inferno Tower. This is a very strong spell that has the potential to deal thousands of damage to your tower, so we're going to talk about how to counter this beast of a spell. Since the first skeleton takes 2.5 seconds to spawn, it's not a great reactive card on defense, but it does prove useful if you just need to defend for the last 20 seconds and you don't need to net any positive elixir trades. It's a high cost card and a huge commitment to use on defense, but when you do use it, it's harder to counter than Skarmy and guards. Graveyard can counter Sparky, but it's basically a more expensive skeleton army to counter her. The Graveyard is like any offensive card, you can't afford to ignore it. 2 skeletons spawn per second. An arena tower can take care of 1 skeleton per second. Skeletons accumulate fast if ignored. Ranged units that can one-shot skeletons are very good. A musketeer can help the arena tower counter the Graveyard very well. Archers can one-shot skeletons as well. They can shut down a Graveyard for a larger positive elixir trade. Minions outperform Mega Minion in sweeping up skeletons. Very fast units like Lumberjack and Goblins are very good at countering the Graveyard. Goblins can shut down a Graveyard, but they're a bit riskier if your opponent has Zap available. Valkyrie counters the Graveyard incredibly well when planted inside the spawn area. This is where the bulk will spawn. Anything spawned on the opposite side of the spawn area will get taken care of by the arena tower. If you don't have any direct counters available, a tank can distract the skeletons. Guards are probably one of the best melee counters because they're slightly ranged, with the bonus that the shields are zap proof. They act as tanks inside the spawn area. Mass units work very well against countering the Graveyard. Knowing all these basic interactions help you deal with the Graveyard in real situations. Spells are decent at preventing some damage done to the tower, but you have to wait until the skeletons have accumulated before casting. If this is your only counter, you're going to suffer some damage. Poison works reasonably well, but it takes 2 ticks to kill a skeleton, so damage will still be done to your tower. An Ice Wizard can tank in the spawn area. Although he doesn't one-shot skeletons, he can prevent quite a bit of damage. Spear Goblins can deal with the Graveyard too. In numbers, they can manage the skeletons. This is how Graveyard will interact with all these other units. They'll protect your tower, but they're not going to completely stop the damage. There are so many other ways to use Graveyard offensively. I hope this opens up new opportunities for you to invent creative tech. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more quality OJ. There was a leak showing the Graveyard taking out the King's Tower. In this leaked footage, it used Max Graveyard and Mirror on a level 10 King's Tower. The reality of it is that it's going to cost 11 elixir, and at tournament standard it won't take out the King's Tower. It's no more threatening than a Miner and Goblin Barrel sent to the King's Tower.